Hello you lovely lot, my name is Max, welcome back to my YouTube channel and another Nottingham Forest match preview, where today we are detailing Forest's away trip down to London and the Emirates Stadium to take on Mikel Arteta and his very impressive high-flying Arsenal team, the team we actually knocked out in the third round of last year's FA Cup. If you are new around here, these videos go as following. We start with an initial discussion providing some context to the season thus far for our opposition, followed by a deep dive into some of the stats discussing where their attack and their defence lie in terms of the context of the Premier League this season, followed by a discussion on their tactics, talking a bit more in depth on what we can expect on the day in the game, and then of course my overall scoreline predictions for the match. So if you do enjoy this kind of stuff, don't forget to drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a single video, and be sure to check out my TikTok page, which is linked in the description of this video. And without any further ado, let's start talking about Mikel Arteta and this incredibly solid and very decent Arsenal side. So as we usually do, we will start by providing some context to our opposition, and it's been a fantastic start to the season for Arsenal. At the time of recording, they are currently top of the Premier League pile, although this could change of course with Man City and Leicester kicking off in the early match on Saturday afternoon. And as we are a third of the way through the season, more or less, they are starting to look like potentially a title rival for Man City this season, and pretty comfortably a top four side come the end of the campaign as well. And they've done this by combining the elements of what was a really promising squad last season with some really good business in the summer transfer window, spending around £120 million, their three marquee signings being Gabriel Jesus and Alexander Zinchenko arriving from Manchester City, and Fabio Vieira, who's impressed in pretty limited minutes for the Gunners thus far this campaign. And really all three have looked like really solid and impressive signings, and again bring the age of that squad down. It's a very young team that Arsenal are building at the moment, and potentially a team that could build and potentially challenge for the title in the next few seasons. For me personally though, it hasn't been one of their new signings that's impressed me the most, although it does feel like a new signing. William Saliba has arrived in this Arsenal team after getting a couple of years of really good quality first team experience in the French league over the last couple of seasons, and has fitted into this team incredibly well. I've talked about in a couple of recent TikToks about how I think it's quite scary how seamlessly he's fitted into this Arsenal team. For my money, he's probably the most impressive young defender I've seen, at least in the last decade, maybe even my entire time watching Premier League football. He's a very impressive, confident young centre-back, and be doing that at such a young age, I think he's only 2021, is very impressive, very impressive in fact. And the fact that he could be going to the World Cup with France, could be one of their starting centre-backs, and is probably the best defender in what is one of the best teams in the country right now at his age is frightening. So with that out of the way, let's start talking about the stats in a little bit more detail in this next section, starting off with their attack, where they have scored the second most goals in the Premier League this campaign, have generated the second most goals on expected goals, or the second most expected goals over the course of the season, which is very impressive when you consider some of the attacking talents in the Premier League this season. But it's even more impressive when you look at their shots. They don't actually take that many shots compared to their title rivals. They take around 15 per 90. For context, Liverpool and Man City at their best probably take around 19 or 20 per 90 minutes, and they haven't really improved in this metric from last season. What they have improved is their ability to convert chances, and that's where the expected goals comes into this. In contrast to last season, they're actually overperforming their expected goals, which means they're finishing at above average rate compared to last season, where they were finishing below average rate. They were underperforming their expected goals. And we can see if we look at things like their conversion rates jumped from 9% to 14% this season. Now again, it's not the best metric to read into, but it really does sort of solidify this idea that whilst they're not creating actually that many more chances than they were last season, they've added a lot more quality and ability to finish in the final third. Gabriel Jesus will of course go a long way in doing that, but Saka, Martinelli and Ødegaard have stepped up their game definitely in terms of their quality of finishing. And as I mentioned in the intro, we are about a third of the way through the season now, and it does feel like we're at the stage where we can really read into these numbers and suggest that Arsenal probably are an elite attacking side. If we were talking 3 or 4 games into the season, they were putting these numbers up, we'd be saying, okay, let's give it a bit more time. But now we've played over 1,000 minutes, we're 12, 13 13 games into the season, we're about a third of the way through, like I say, it does feel like we can start to say and make conclusions that Arsenal are actually a very good attacking side. And when we flip things around, their defence has been just as impressive, if not more so. They've conceded the second least goals in the Premier League at the time of recording, have conceded the third least expected goals over the course of the season, and for the first time under Mikel Arteta as their manager, Arsenal are conceding less than 10 shots per 90 minutes. Now, again, may not sound like much of a metric to go by, but it's a really good way of judging elite teams. The elite teams in the Premier League, your Man Cities, your Liverpools, even your Chelseas, they historically have conceded less than 10 shots per 90 minutes. They are a very widely shot positive team. They take way more shots than they concede, and that's a really good way of gauging a team of being at the elite level of European football. Again, if you look at your likes of Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, they'll also rank really highly for these. And if we were to create a 4-axis graph looking at shot volume and quality of shot, Arsenal would be in the category of conceding very few shots, but also conceding very few shots of quality. If we look at proximity to goal, they're going to concede particularly high quality opportunities compared to their sort of title rivals. Their expected goals, as mentioned, is actually down on last season conceded, and they are a team that, whilst don't concede a lot of shots, they're also shots of very, very low quality, and that is the sign of a really elite defensively solid team compared to the rest of their title rivals. So when we do look into the numbers in a little bit more depth, you can see that Arsenal are not just lucky to be in the position that they're in. They are one of the best teams in the Premier League so far this season. They have one of the best attacks, one of the best defences, and they've even been able to increase their intensity. Their passes per defensive action has dropped from 13 to 10. Again, it's not a massive improvement, but it is a genuine improvement in the team, and it does feel like Arsenal are turning into a sort of elite European team that could at least compete for the top 3, top 2 of the Premier League for the next 3 or 4 seasons as these players head into their prime. So now we spent some time providing some context and analysing the stats for Arsenal this season. Let's talk a bit more in depth about the tactics behind this side, because they are a very intriguing tactical unit. When we look at them in depth, there's a lot of similarities between them now and the Pep Guardiola Manchester City winning machine of the last few seasons that, of course, Arteta learned his craft under. Okay, so we're on the tactics board, and as you can see in the red, we have Arsenal lined up in a 4-2-3-1 shape. Definitely a shape that you would associate with Arsenal, particularly in the Wenger years. And defensively, it definitely looks like it. It drops back into a nice, deep and compact 4-2-3-1 that's able to build up pressure and break really effectively on the counter-attack. Nothing particularly out of the ordinary here in terms of their defensive shape. In terms of the personnel, I feel like it picks itself more or less. You've got obviously Ramsdale in goal, Ben White at right back, Gabriel and Saliba at centre back. You've got Zinchenko or Tierney playing on the left, a defensive midfield pairing of Partey and Xhaka, and a front four of Saka, Martinelli, Ødegaard and Jesus drifting on that front line. But when we look at Arsenal in their attacking phases, it's actually a much different shape and a much more different story. It actually looks much more like a lopsided 4-3-3 shape. Xhaka able to push up from that midfield too to provide those incisive passes and that really good engine in the midfield, whilst also able to come back defensively and aid in build-up, but also aid defensively for Partey. And generally, it probably looks like quite a familiar shape if you're familiar with Man City and the way they play. Their attack does adopt a lot of the principles of positional play. As you can see, I've broken the pitch down into 5 sections, the 5 vertical attacking sections. You've got your little central area here, you've got your half spaces out here, and your wide areas in the wider sections of the pitch. And Arsenal's attack always looks to maintain someone within each vertical space of the pitch. It doesn't really matter who is in that place. Quite often you'll see Saka coming inside and Ødegaard going outside. You might see Martinelli coming to more central positions and Gabriel Jesus going into quite a wide position, considering he is much more of a conventional centre forward. What is the principle? As long as there's someone in every section of the pitch, it doesn't really matter, because the principle is you're trying to stretch the opposition as wide as possible. So how do Arsenal cover for this? Again, it's quite conventional in terms of positional play. You'll have your number 6, your sitting, anchoring midfielder, Thomas Partey, in Arsenal's case, sitting alongside the fullbacks who tuck inside. They invert, quite a common Pep Guardiola tactic that we've seen translate into this Arsenal team, where they can offer that little bit of defensive coverage, particularly in central areas if the ball does get turned over. from Arsenal, they can then cover these central areas. And of course, the centre-backs who can split wide and are able to build out from the back as well. And defensively, or attacking-wise, the defence looks like a 2-3-5 shape. Your 5 at the front, your 3 in the midfield, and your 2 centre-backs split them wide and using Ramsdale as the 11th man. Of course, Arsenal really good at getting the ball into these wide areas where they can look to create chances or cross into the box, cutting it back. Quite often they'll do that where they work into wide areas, cut it quickly back inside. But one thing that Arsenal have really improved this season and really over the last sort of 18 months or so is their ability to create from more central positions, and a big part of that has been the signing of Martin Odegaard, much more of a conventional number 10 than they had in their squad previous to this. What this allows them to do is drop into deeper areas, pick up the ball, dictate from deep, come into high areas and attack from these areas, come into wide areas. He's in a much more conventional 3-8 role that you would associate with someone like David Silva or Kevin De Bruyne at Manchester City in their pomp, able to come into these wide areas, pick the ball up from deep, almost go into almost like a centre forward kind of position. Very free in that role, has his defensive responsibilities, but occupying what a traditional number 10 would do in terms of creating chances and working in and around the central areas of the box. Of course, though, if you're going to play like Man City, it leaves you with Man City-esque weaknesses, and these are the ways in which I think Forest need to capitalise. Firstly, these almost half-back, right-back, left-back who tuck inside and into the midfield. We need to be nice and tight on them with our attacking midfielders, whether that's Lingard, Brennan Johnson, Morgan Gibbs-White. I actually think we should be trying to man-mark these guys. They're very important for build-up and getting the ball into wide areas. They're obviously the players who are anchoring the midfield alongside Thomas Partey. And if we can stop them from getting the ball out, obviously prevents them from getting into their flow and structure, but it also puts pressure on them that we can maybe turn the ball high at the pitch. I think we've really improved on in recent weeks. But when we do get the ball, and when we do win the ball, particularly from deep areas, we need to be getting the players nice and wide. There's not width when you play in this kind of structure defensively. Obviously, you're expecting your centre-backs to come over and cover, maybe your full-backs. It does leave space for us to run in behind because they play such a high defensive line, almost like this kind of shape. You know, lots of space in these kinds of areas for us to run into. And it's going to be really important that we get pace into those areas on the counter-attack, looking to really counter high at the pitch and express the width that we have in this team. So in terms of scoreline prediction, I'm going to be pretty ambitious in this one actually. We're in decent form at the moment. We've picked up 5 points from our last 4 games. We've only conceded twice in those 4 matches, kept clean sheets against Brighton and Liverpool. Defensively, we've looked a lot more better, and the attack is starting to click. We're starting to get much more of a coherent system appearing. So I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw at the Emirates. We are a little bit of a bogey team for Arsenal. Obviously, we beat them in the FA Cup back in January in the 3rd round. And it does feel like potentially Arsenal have had some pretty poor results in the last couple of weeks. We can maybe nick something. And I think if we can do that, heading into the World Cup in a position where we are in touching distance of getting out the relegation zone come the end of the World Cup period, I think we'd be in a very healthy position. So I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. But be sure to let me know your scoreline predictions in that comment section down below. And whilst you're down there, don't forget to drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. And check out my TikTok page where I post 11s and analysis and all that kind of stuff. Bit more loose, fun stuff on the TikTok. With that being said, if you're enjoying the game, enjoy it. Enjoy the trip down to London. Hope it's a good one. And I will catch you later.